Welcome to Brews Business. My name is Jacob Dubois, and today we are chatting with Aman Ailani, a recent college graduate who founded Sahol last September, a sugar-free and dairy-free cold brew that is locally made in small batches. Aman, welcome to Brews Business.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation, but before we start with the questions, we always test the brew. And today, it's kind of special. It is your cold brew, Aman's a company. So let's give it a taste. I have one over here.
Yep, I got one too.
Cheers. It's delicious, and it's so cool. First, what's your take on the brew before we get going?
Yeah, it's I might be a little biased, but I think it's the best cold brew I've ever had. It's very smooth. It's I would say it's more like mellow. It's like very light, very chocolatey. Kind of tastes like strong chocolate milk almost. It's not overpowering. It doesn't leave that bittery, that acidic aftertaste in your mouth. Goes on real nice, and it packs a punch too. It's about 2 cups of coffee in there, so it definitely packs a punch. It'll have you buzzing all day.
Yeah, and I love it because I'm also a big chocolate milk guy, and I drink my normal coffee black. So for me, this is, a good combo. And I'm glad you made that connection, which is really kind of interesting for, a cold brew company to draw some conclusions to chocolate milk. But now that you say it out loud, I totally get it. It's a darker, heavier feeling, but it's not, you don't get that bitterness bite that is going to annoy you for a couple seconds. So I love it. And obviously I'm excited to jump right into it. Can you just give us the backstory? How does someone like you, so young, recent college graduate, start a cold brew company and have, literally I'm, miles away, and somehow I managed to get my hands on your cold brew?
Yeah. Thanks for getting some, first of all. So a little backstory on me, my name's Aman. I was born and raised in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. I lived there for the first 17 years of my life. I came over to Boston in 2016 for college. So I went to Bentley University. I played golf at Bentley. You can see my clubs in the background there. And I had a great time. Bentley was probably some of the greatest years of my life. I made some of my closest friendships were born at Bentley and on the golf team and so on. But I actually never drank coffee until the fall semester of my freshman year. So I was up late one night studying for a midterm, and I need a little energy boost to keep me going. So I grabbed one of those bottled frappe type coffees from the vending machine, and a couple of sips in, I realized, wow, this thing is just loaded with sugar. Like it's not gonna do the trick. It's not gonna work. So obviously I have a sugar crash. I'm not able to stay up. I'm not able to continue studying. And being naturally entrepreneurial from a young age, I decided, okay, like what can I do about this? So I buy my own cold brew maker, so like a little cold brew bottle, and I buy that, and I take it back home with me to Dubai that summer, and I make my own cold brew. And that's pretty much how I made coffee for the next 4 years while I was in college, while I was back home in Dubai, and that's pretty much what kept me going. So fast forward to the spring of my senior year, and as an entrepreneurship major, we all had to start and launch our own businesses in order to graduate. So you can do something big, you can do something small. Some of my friends did like a dorm cleaning service or a car cleaning service, so it really didn't have to be very extravagant by any means. But I had this passion for coffee my whole life for the last few years. So my professor approached me and he was like, hey, like, why don't you just do something with that coffee thing? And I was like, no, you're crazy. That'll never work. But he goes, no, like, seriously, look at it. And I did. And it seemed, a lot more viable than I actually thought it was. I toured a couple manufacturing facilities, met a couple, co-packers, and one thing led to another. We launched, we had our first production run, like our small production run in March. Unfortunately, we were not able to enter retail stores that summer due to COVID, but we eventually entered our first retail store in October of 2020, and we've grown, 900% since then. So we're up to over 20 stores right now across New England, all the way from the South Shore of Massachusetts and even Rhode Island coming up soon, all the way up north to Portland, Maine, and hopefully one day to Vermont as well. Vermonters are some tough cookies to crack, man. It's been a hard process trying to get one, but we remain confident, and yeah, the future looks bright.
That's so amazing, and you can tell that despite all the odds, you're growing steadily, and that's so important, especially during a time like this. I will say you're probably lucky that you're pitching a cold brew to Vermonters instead of a beer, because that'd be very impressive if you got them to take your Massachusetts beer up here. Nonetheless, what has been the most surprising thing about starting a business? I feel like this question is such a good one to be asked in the early stages of a business. And I don't want to let it go to waste, as you mature and grow. So what's been pretty surprising for you?
So I think the answer is two-pronged. I think within the packaged food industry, the most surprising thing has been labels. So you wouldn't think twice about a label, right? But that process took, I thought it was I'll send in my artwork, I'll have labels in a week, but that process can take it's not short at all. Labels in general are just hard. They take a while, especially to produce them at the volume that they need to be produced. So labels was my first real awakening. Maybe I don't really know as much about this industry as I thought I did. But moving past that, I think just in general, just how much more resilient and how much more grit I thought I actually had that I didn't know about. I've taken a couple heavy hits, and fast forward 3, 4, 5 months from then, and we're still growing, we're still going, and it's kind of a cool moment for me to step back and see wow, even though we've only been alive for 6 months, I've taken some big hits in that time. We've still been able to grow, we've still been able to keep trucking along. So that gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is it sounds like you were self-aware enough to understand both the losses and the wins, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs can really feel like that at every single stage. I've listened to some podcasts where, somebody has a mainstream service that, whatever, the founders of Spotify, who clearly have market share and everything and millions of dollars or whatever, but they don't feel like they've really hit what they needed to hit. And I think it's important to realize that, because when the lows are there, you need to step back and be like, well, wait a minute, I had a win here, a week ago, or this low wouldn't feel as low if I wasn't as high. So I can definitely hear that coming through. And I think that's going to help you, exponentially as you mature and the business, reaches new lows and new highs, right? We can't always go up, I think is one thing you need as an entrepreneur.
One thing that I've learned to do that's been pretty helpful is have a weekly planner. And I think just in the midst of, week to week to day, it's easy to, I haven't opened an account in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, wow, what am I doing wrong? This sucks. I'm terrible at my job. But it's one thing I started doing is at the end of every week, writing in 2 or 3 wins that I had, as small as they could be. So when you're going through those hard days, when you pull yourself out, when you're able to look at that, holistically and bigger picture, you're able to see wow, this actually made a lot more progress than I'm giving myself credit for. So that's been pretty helpful for me.
Give us a little background on the brand. I want to know, what's the inspiration? What do you have going on behind this brand? Of course, it's not just a cold brew company, right?
Well, the biggest thing for me behind it is that, some of the greatest moments in my life have happened over coffee. Whether it's just hanging out with my family or, getting coffee with my friends while I was in college, or, coffee over brunch on the weekends. Coffee has a really nice way of bringing people together. And what I wanted to bring across in the can is when you're on the go and when you're taking those memories and you're taking, that part of with you, on the go, why can't coffee on the go be as good as a coffee you would get from a coffee shop? Why do we have to compromise taste for convenience? I don't think that it's not always has to be a good trade-off. And now, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, you're seeing this craft coffee wave come up, and you're seeing third wave of coffee come up, and it's booming. Independent coffee roasters all over the country are making coffee better, and specially great coffee. We're paying farmers fair prices finally, but it's been a slow burn to get that over to the ready to drink space. There could be a multitude of reasons for that, but what I'm really passionate about is getting cafe quality cold brew, but on the train, in your car, on a hike, just hanging out with your friends and in a classroom. So that's kind of the bigger heart behind this brand. And obviously through everything, people are a big part of it. My family's been really, really influential. So that's why there are 3 people on the can. And yeah, I'm pumped about the future, man.
That's so inspiring. I love it. Do you have any specific philosophies based on what you decide to work on, or, hard and fast rules to help you keep you focused or productive?
A little bit. I think one thing that I've kind of learned not to do is just sit at my desk or sit on my emails all day. I think for me, what that does is it just kind of produces anxiety within me. Like, oh, why am I not getting email replies? Or why is this person not getting back to me? Why can't I hear back from that person? I think this doesn't work. So what I've learned to do is kind of like break my time up and only check my email if I have the intention of responding to emails. That's been a big, game changer for me. Another thing that I did is I took email off my phone completely. The way I see it, if the sky's falling down, you won't be emailing me about it. I'll probably get a call or a text. So taking my email off my phone has been big. And then also creating intentional rest on the weekends. So Saturdays, I don't think about work. I don't touch work. And that just really just fuels me up for the week ahead.
Yeah. And it's such a powerful lesson. And it took me a while to realize that as well. Like I have access to my email on my phone, but I don't have notifications, which I think is, and to somebody that thinks you're insane for taking your, work email off your phone, I would encourage them to at least start, if you're interested in experimenting, start with turning off notifications so that, you can check it still whenever you want, but you're not, responding to an email ASAP that maybe doesn't need that access. But the bigger picture here, I think you touched on this, is, working on the business and working in the business, which is kind of you have to shift your schedule a little bit. And I've fallen, victim to this as well, just staring at, sitting here waiting for something to happen, and have an email come in so that I can work on a graphic or whatever. However, it's so much more productive if we schedule our time out, and, I could be working on my sales process or, some other working on the business, while every email that comes in, I can batch those out later in the day. Mm-hmm. Have you found any tips or tools, or maybe even like some incredible results after you've done this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that we've kind of fallen prey to in our society today is this instant gratification thing. And I mean, so much for me to say that I make cold brew in Canada you don't have to wait in line in the coffee shop for. But I'm talking about it from a different, like more technological point of view. Like I will say that I think the most successful people, if they see an email, they'll get back to it right away. But at the same time, I also think there's no reason for you to reply to every email right away. There's no reason for you to reply to every customer request. Like you're not at everyone's beck and call, basically. And that's something that I've kind of had to hold in this tension is, okay, like if I'm on my email, if I'm on my phone and an important one comes in, I'm not gonna like sit on it for 2 hours just to prove a point that I'm not, like I'm creating my own personal space. Like if I see it, I'll reply to it. But at the same time, what I also realized was if I'm not on my email and one comes in from 4 hours ago and I don't get back to it until the next day, that's nothing to feel bad about. I think that our society has moved to this point of view or this perspective that everything needs to be instant. And I think there are cases when that is necessary, but for the majority, I don't think that, you're supposed to be at people's every need.
Yeah. I think it's such a tough one too, because there are people on either side, right? A more responsive emailer is, you could argue, people are going to like them more. Maybe they'll buy more, they'll be more responsive, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other side too, like, we need to be setting boundaries in order to accomplish our goals. And so like, it's a tough one. And I resonate a lot with it. And I think it's, like this whole conversation about like work-life balance, it really is up to whoever, there's people that argue that work-life balance doesn't even exist. And other people that are obviously like, I don't want my boss emailing me on the weekends, So it's a tricky one, but I do think there's a lot of good that can come from, experimenting and, taking an email off your phone just to see what happens.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I've had email off my phone for a couple of weeks now, and it's nothing like major, nothing urgent has happened. And it's just by the nature of the emails that I get in general, it doesn't seem like anything urgent is going to happen over email. And to your other point, I think too, one thing that's really important to note is I think responsive emails are very good. You know, it's something I try to hold myself to is like not sit on emails if I know they're supposed to be responded to. But at the same time, you know, we're also human and we're not robots, we're not machines that have automated reply systems. So it's been a journey for me to learning to hold that in tension with each other.
All right, jumping back to a question about somebody that is considering following your footsteps in, beverage or food or something like that. Can you explain, I think you mentioned this earlier, can you explain co-packing and how that's beneficial for you or somebody with a future business?
Yeah, I mean, I think co-packers are great because the alternative to a co-packer is, you know, buying your own equipment and doing it yourself, which without you even making a single thing, you're probably going to be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands in the hole before you ever make a good. So co-packers are good because it also helps you just be realistic from the get-go. Like you're going to be able to get your product to market a lot quicker. You're going to be able to be in good standing with the FDA way easier. Like you don't have to worry about all that if you use a co-packer that's already on good terms and good standing. And yeah, I mean it's kind of a no-brainer, but at the same time, you know, depending on your product, depending on what you do, like you know, it's not the route for everyone. But for me or for us, co-packing has been great because now we're not having to think about our cans. We're not having to think about, you know, nitrogen flushing our cans. We're not having to think about water pipes or this or that. All we do is we pay a flat rate and we come out with product that can hit the stores within hours, basically.
That's amazing. And if you had to go through starting this business again, is there anything that you would want to tell, you know, somebody that is looking to follow your footsteps?
I would say just be really slow to spend. One thing that brands can fall victim to really easily is thinking that they need every flashy thing thrown their way. You know, oh, you need to launch with a third-party logistics company to ship your product out for you. You need to launch with a marketing agency that's going to produce 20 social media graphics a month for you. You need to launch with someone who can do this, but the reality is you can do a lot more of that than you think you can. You know, to an extent, it's going to get to a point where, yeah, you know, your time is probably best spent not creating social media graphics, and it probably is best spent, you know, working on other things in your business. But in the early days and when you're kind of getting off the ground, your margins are everything. You know, protect those margins, protect your piece, protect the fact that, you know, once you start putting on costs on your business, it's really hard to take them off because you just get so used to having everyone do everything for you. So one thing that's really helped me is being really careful of what I'm spending my money on and who I'm spending my money on. So we don't, like, our only overhead every month is we pay for QuickBooks, which is about it. So what that does is it gives us a really nice opportunity to kind of like grow and be okay with, you know, taking our time growing because we don't have the pressure of these overheads every month.
That's amazing. And I think because of co-packing and other things like that, being intentional about your spending, you have the ability to do that, right? It would be a lot harder if, you know, let's take a restaurant, for example, you know, that's already 150 grand, plus maybe a 12-year lease or something. You can't really, well, now that commercial kitchens are becoming rentable and stuff like that, we may see, you know, some sort of models, but a traditional restaurant, you can't start that without, you know, dumping a lot of cash into it. I think this is a really, and to see the increase in, you know, CPG and how people are taking affinity to unique brands like yours, I think this is a good opportunity in a space where, you know, there's so many other snacks and beverages that are yet to be invented. Can you talk about how your decision to start a cold brew company amongst other competitors, you know, what is that like? Has it been a battle to get shelf space? Tell me how it is to compete against some of these bigger names.
Well, I think, you know, to an extent, everything in life is a competition. You know, I'm not trying to sound like super varsity saying that, but like to an extent, like as I'm sure you know this and whoever's listening to this knows this, it's like you kind of have to fight for every inch, basically, in anything you do, but especially in retail. Shelf space is everything. But at the same time, it's also not as hard as people think it is to get. So I would say that our first kind of dozen or 15 to 20 accounts here in Boston they weren't easy, but it's not like they were impossible either. People have this notion that, oh, it's impossible. It's not impossible. It's all about how do you tell your story? How do you create a business case for the buyer so that when you read the meeting, the buyer goes, I have to bring these guys in. Like it's a no-brainer. And I think people are just not willing to put that work in. I think the easiest excuse is saying, oh, it's competitive, I have no shot. I will say though, once you leave your home state, it gets considerably harder. We landed in a couple of stores in Maine, and we're actually going to hit more stores in Maine soon. But like Maine was hard, man. Like Vermont is so hard. But that's only because, look, brands in Vermont are getting the same treatment that we got in Massachusetts, right? The only reason the first 5 stores took a shot on us when we had 0 sales data to prove that we were ever going to move is because that we were a local brand and they wanted to support local brands. So I have nothing against, Vermont retailers like supporting Vermont brands or New Hampshire retailers supporting New Hampshire brands. The conversation then flips and you don't have the ability to call on or call out your local roots anymore. So then it's like, okay, like, now it's time to play ball, I guess. But at the end of the day, man, it's all about creating a business case. And at the end of the day, grocery buyers and, grocery store owners, their only goal is to make higher sales. Like they don't care about anything else past that. At the end of the day, if they're selling more, they're happy. So as long as you can prove that, you're going to bring higher sales to their categories, then you'll get a shot.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you would say that that you kind of win some business locally because maybe they want to support locally. However, when you branch out, more people are starting to care less about where you're from and more about, like, for example, case velocity. How quickly does this thing sell, right? Is that true?
100%. 100%. I would say that off the top of my head, like our first 5, like I said, like our first 5 accounts in Boston, they weren't that hard because at the end of the day, we're a local brand that's being produced less than 50 miles from their store. Like, why wouldn't they want to carry us? Like, it's such a low risk thing. But once we get into Burlington, Vermont, like grocery buyers in Burlington, Vermont have no incentive to carry us. Like we do nothing for them. They have no way to promote us in their local section of their stores. Their shoppers are probably not going to care too much about the fact that we're from Boston when there's another brand from Burlington on their shelves. So at that point, it's not a lost battle. It's just a different battle. And at that point, you kind of have to just prove yourself with, like you said, case velocities. Our case of 12 packs are selling out in under 10 days at similar stores in Boston, and we think we can bring that same growth to you. That's what they want to hear. They want to hear that, you support your brand at the store level, through promotions, through shelf toppers, but they also want to hear that, you do a lot of work on social media. They also want to hear that you have an engaged following, and they also want to hear that, you're passionate about it. There's nothing worse than a brand being on the shelf and they never sell and the brand does nothing about it. So yeah, it's definitely a mix of things.
It makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Your people close by are so much more likely to take a risk because you shop there yourself or something, and maybe they want to feel like they're supporting locally. I like it. Switching gears a little bit, what is one of the best things that's happened to you or the business because of or during this pandemic?
Well, we launched during the pandemic. It's not something we talk about a lot, but the reason that, I think the reason that we saw some success early was because people were going to coffee shops less. People weren't really sitting in coffee shops anymore. So now they want something that's of cafe quality that they can drink from their home office, which is part of the reason that, canned coffees and canned kombuchas, bottled kombuchas are on the rise, is because people don't really want to sacrifice convenience for quality anymore. And the pandemic has kind of brought that to the forefront of people's minds, whether it's, restaurant doing meal kits or whether it's, executive chefs doing home deliveries. Like people are now realizing that they're willing to pay for something that they would have previously had to leave the house for. So I think in some ways, like the pandemic and people being stuck at home a lot more has actually helped us.
That makes sense. And it wouldn't be fair without analyzing the other side. What's one thing that's been more challenging because of this?
Yeah. So the grocery industry pre-pandemic, I have no idea what it looked like, but from what I hear from my friends, demos were crazy and demos were such a big help. Like I can only imagine how much of a help it would have been if I can go and sample my coffee in some of these stores that we're in, but that's not possible right now. So the flip side of that is now you're in a position where you have to drive trial without being able to allow customers to sample in store, which is tough. But I think that because we don't know anything different, we have an advantage on the brands that are kind of like, walking home with their tail between their legs because they're like, oh, we can't demo, this account is useless. So now that opens up new opportunities for us, newer brands that are, as long as you're able to get a little creative and get gritty and, get your hands dirty, I think there's some really, really nice opportunities, especially on social media nowadays.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And if you think about it, a cold brew company that maybe started a year before you and was used to growing with trials. And then your company is, you're looking at some slow growth based on, having to be creative and getting in the store. However, somebody else, that's been doing trials and stuff might be looking at a decrease, right? Which is, honestly, it's really just a perspective.
100%.
And somebody's inability to identify that and change quickly can really hurt the business, especially because, this pandemic didn't really, it's been here for quite a while and things are changing very slowly. That's kind of interesting to step back and look at that. And it might be something down the road that the brand really benefits from. And I think a lot of times too, there's a lot of companies that come out of something like, a pandemic and people start to realize what we need, I suppose. All right. I got another question for you. And this one is not super business related, but what is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made?
More recently, I think my health. I've started training for a half marathon. I've been running a couple times a week, like running a lot. And it's honestly one of the best things I've ever done for myself, because I truly think that if you're a business owner and, if you work for a business, like that business is only going to be as good as you are. So I think bettering yourself physically and emotionally, mentally has been a huge shift for me.
That's great. And I think too, what's fascinating is, when you're busy and you have so many things to do, you have sales calls, you have whatever going on. Sometimes, and I think I might be stealing this from your LinkedIn, but sometimes running, going for a 2-mile run could be the best thing to do at that moment, because it means it's going to translate into you working harder and healthier throughout the rest of the day or the week, which is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great one. Where do you find your inspiration? Who are you watching? Who is setting the milestones for you? It could be yourself, but are there other people that you're like, benchmarking, if you will?
Absolutely. A couple of brands off the top of my head. Olipop, David Lester, he's the founder. Sanzo, they're an Asian-inspired sparkling water company. Alessandro Rocco is the founder of that. I1, obviously with Mark Samuel, he's a legend. Partake Cookies with Denise Woodward. She is just a legend. She just launched Trader Joe's. I don't know why I forgot about that, but she's a legend. And then also within the perishable space, there's some really just unbelievable bands. GT's Kombucha, GT Dave. That guy is probably one of my heroes, just because we're very similar in the sense that, he's been at this for over 20 years. He's never taken a dollar of outside funding, and he currently owns 40% of the global kombucha industry. Like, that's incredible. He's been grinding and he's been sticking to his guns for over 20 years. So that's one that, really resonates with me.
Wow. That is fascinating. I'm going to write that down and look this guy up.
Yeah. He did a podcast with Stick With Your Dreams. It was called, with David of Dream Pops. You should check that out. It was really good.
I will certainly do that. Wow. All right. Last question for you. What was the best part of your day today?
Best part of my day today. I get a lot of joy from my morning routine. For me, I've been recently, as much as I love cold brew, I've been cranking my pour over coffees. I love making a good pour over. I love the kind of ritual element that comes with that. It's a nice way for me to start my day. So I made a solid coffee this morning, and it's still pretty early, so I'm going to go on a run here later today, which I think will be pretty good.
That is awesome. Well, one last thing, the people are probably going to want to look for some cold brew. They're going to want to connect with you. Do you have a place where we can find you or find the brand?
Absolutely. Find us on Instagram. It's Sip Sahol, SIPSAHOL. Sip Sahol on Instagram. Also find me on LinkedIn and shoot us a message on IG. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks so much and have a good day.
Yeah, you too.